I am Don Haas, the Director of Teacher Programming at the Paleontological Research Institution, and your host this evening. And I'm going to introduce my my co-moderator, Jelana Sheets. So you want to say hello, Jelana?
Hi, yes, my name is Jelana Sheets. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a behavior scientist and current civic science fellow with the Aspen Institute. And so today I'm here representing my affiliation with Sea Change Institute, as well as an advisor of the Climate Mental Health Network.
Thank you. And next, oops, where's my list of panelists? Next, let's go to Andra. Andra, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Andra Yeghoian. I'm the Environmental Literacy and Sustainability Coordinator at the San Mateo County Office of Education.
Thank you. And Leslie will be joining us by pre-recorded video in a few minutes. So you'll hear from her in a minute. Vernessa, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Register, Senior Program Director of Health at the National Environmental Education Foundation.
And Vanessa?
Hello, I'm Vanessa Villanueva, and I am a Gen Z advisor for the Climate Mental Health Network, among other things, but I don't want to get into details of what I do in my own community. But yeah, thank you.
All righty, thank you. And Max?
Yeah, hi everyone. Max Offerman, 24-year-old environmentalist, artist, also a Gen Z advisor for the Climate Mental Health Network.
Yes, and this is proudly co-sponsored by the Paleontological Research Institution and the Climate Mental Health Network. And now we are going to have Leslie introduce, and I'm actually going to stop sharing for a minute because I forgot to click the share audio button when I shared screen. So let me do it right this time. There we go. And
welcome everyone, and thank you for joining in on this really important topic about dealing with the natural feelings that arise around climate change for ourselves and in helping our kids and youth with this. And you'll probably be hearing quite a bit about the importance of not only recognizing our feelings, but how to self-regulate when those feelings get big, which is really possible with the climate change themes. And no better way to learn that than to start with ourselves. So we're going to take a very short experiential time here to do just that. So I invite you to join me and either close your eyes or let them have a soft focus. And to feel yourself present in your body all the way down to the soles of your feet, up to the top of your head, into your arms and hands. And then to become aware of the ebb and flow of your breath. Letting the breath in be welcoming and know that it's replenishing. And allowing the breath out to be releasing and settling. And this is such a good reset for our nervous systems. And there's also a very ancient rhythm in this, of filling up and an emptying out that we experience in the rising and the setting of the sun, in the ebb and flow of the tides, in the waxing and waning of the moon and the turning of the seasons. So feel how your own breath is part of this larger rhythm of life. Our connection to this enlivened system of which we are interdependent and a part. Letting that awareness fill you as you arrive here for our time together. And with that awareness, I invite you to open your eyes again and to keep that with you as we dive into some of these themes together.
And she's going to dive.
So I'm going to very quickly go over some of the key themes that are arising out of climate psychology in terms of how to best support our kids, especially around the experience and feelings that come up. And I'm going to start with the two biggest ones. The first one is, let this be an intergenerational effort, that we're all affected by this. In fact, we're all learning and we all have feelings. So it's joining into the concerns and the solutions as we move forward together. And that in dealing with feelings, there's really two essential parts that need to be integrated. One is, what are these feelings? How do we acknowledge them, experience them, work with them? And then how do we also take our humanity and bring it into what we can all do to create a healthier, safer world together in the context of community and social justice? So the ways we do that, of course, are going to vary a bit on ages and developmental stages. So for these really young ones, just cultivate that natural wonder and excitement that they bring to the natural world. They want to learn about how plants grow. Let them be a part and learn through doing. And you can already begin to introduce ways that what they do make a difference. That if they turn off the faucet because of awareness around water, it's because we're sharing it with the plants and animals outside. This is a really transitional age where some kids as young as 10 start to feel that deeper sense of concern about the trajectory we're on. And that varies for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it comes later, but still gauging where they are with this, what they're curious about, how they can participate, and let it start to become a collective effort, maybe through school initiatives like a Turn It Off campaign. And we know that kids are little integrity detectives, so be aware that what you do as well is going to have an impact. And it really matters to them where we put our attention. It communicates a lot when we show that this is important to us too. So this age group, questions are big, feelings are big. They want to do a lot of their own independent learning about this, so make sure they can find accurate resources. We know how challenging it can be to navigate accurate information on social media and in traditional news outlets. So find ways to help guide them on that and encourage that whatever their talents, interests, and strengths can go towards sustainability efforts. And then at this age, they are ready and wanting often to take more of a leadership role, which is terrific, but not abandoning that sense that we are in this together, that we might even be learning from them at times, but it's not up to them to solve this on their own. And really, when it comes to the feelings part, there's an awful lot of basic learning we still need to do. There's still this sense that certain feelings are bad and we should only feel certain ways, but we need to recognize that if you care and if you pay attention, there's going to be times when you feel afraid or sad or frustrated or angry. And that's because we're built in with these signals. They're messengers for us. So we might feel sad when something's wrong and it might be time to make room for something new. Anger might mean that we need to stand up for what we believe in. Fear is telling us we need to pay attention because there's the potential of harm or injury here. And we also, and this comes from a more trauma-informed perspective, need to recognize when the stresses or the feelings get really big. That's kind of moving outside of this, what's called a window of tolerance represented between those two parallel lines, and how to self-regulate, like that breathing practice we did together, to come back in a place where we have our best selves forward again in our interactions. So when we're teaching climate change, one way to structure this is called toggling. We teach about what's happening, and then we take time with the feelings that arise to identify them, to process them. And this can be somewhat simple. Ask questions. What do you love most about the natural world? When are those times you feel sad or angry or afraid? And what are those ways that you're excited to get involved? A lot of ways to do it. Again, the breath is one of those core practices, and sometimes it can be fun. There's ways to shake it off too, which often is accompanied by laughter, but it's tied into research about why that's also a good reset for our nervous systems. So as kids get involved, know that activism can look like many, many things, and go with those things they're drawn to. If you have a child who wants to be a chef, that opens up doors to understand about agriculture and how food is raised responsibly or less sustainably. And all of those interests open those doorways. So if this is of interest to you, I encourage you to check out this resource. It shows ways to pair climate science that's been vetted with emotional resiliency exercises and practices. It was oriented toward middle school kids, but just about all of them are adaptable to many age groups. So thank you very much.
Thank you to the virtual Leslie. And next up in the agenda is, well, let me say one word that I put in there about not being afraid of fear. I think it's really important to not suppress this, and I will let the professionals talk more about that. And I'm going to hand it off to Jelana. Go ahead, Jelana, and I can stop sharing. I think you said you've got one slide.
Sure, and I apologize, I didn't realize my video was off. So again, I'm very excited to be on the call this evening, and I'm going to speak just briefly. And so I'd like to share a little bit about some work that I've done it through my work with Sea Change Institute, and just as someone who's committed to engaging in efforts that lead to the design of effective strategies and tools to reduce the impacts of climate change on mental health among young people. And so we've recently led a project in partnership with the Climate Mental Health Network, as well as the Global Fund for Mental Health. And it was funded by Blue Shield of California. And it focused on climate mental health. And so I'm just going to go through briefly what we did in this particular project. And so first, we synthesized a decade of research and conducted interviews with a number of experts from literally all over the world on the mental health impacts of climate change on young people. And so when you hear young people, this includes children, adolescents, young adults, with a focus on youth and those who identify as BIPOC. So that's Black, Indigenous, people of color. And you may be asking, okay, why are people particularly, why are young people particularly vulnerable to the mental health impacts of climate change? And so there are a number of reasons, and I'll highlight just a few of them. So first, the nervous system of young people are still, still developing, making them more vulnerable to the effects of intense stress. And if you think about it, adolescence is a key period for the emergence of psychopathology. And young people have often not fully developed the ability to regulate their emotions or resilience resources needed so that they can effectively cope with intense the stressors associated with climate change. Just even think about the direct and indirect impacts and the short and longer term implications of climate change, things that may happen because of different types of events to them or even their families. Additionally, climate change modeling predicts that young people, though they may bear little responsibility for what's actually causing climate change, they actually bear the brunt of its consequences. And so this has been called intergenerational inequality. For example, research has projected that today's children will actually experience 3 times the number of climate disasters in their lifetime compared to their grandparents. And so young people are internalizing this reality. And so there was a recent global study that included, the United States, and it was 10,000 people in 10 different countries. And it speaks to the magnitude of the issue. And so the authors found that 75% of the young people surveyed said that the future is frightening. And over half, or 56%, said that humanity is doomed. And 55% said that things that they value most will be destroyed. And so when you hear this, it's very sobering. And so in thinking more about the issues, and if you layer on race, ethnicity, and consider the experience of racial and ethnic minorities who actually contribute the least to climate change, but they're actually impacted the most, this brings to surface the interrelatedness of many racial and social justice issues that must be simultaneously addressed. And so again, back to, those are some of the things that came out in the report when we did this in-depth literature review. And, looking at the multiple pathways by which climate change impacts the mental health of young people, we're really honing in, on these types of things and looking at the historical and contextual factors as well. And so, as we were gathering all this data, we developed a framework of 7 core strategies and resources for coping with climate change. And so I'm just going to briefly just share those, share a slide with those strategies. Give me 1 second. So you should be able to see my screen. I see some nods. And so from that data, we see that the 7 core strategies were acknowledging and validating feelings, emotional coping tools, social connections, connecting with nature, climate action, self-care, and climate justice awareness. And so given the length of time that I have, I won't be able to go in depth and talk about what each of those are, but I did at least want to mention those to you. And we're putting links to the report so that you can kind of take, peruse through it and see exactly what those are, because those are things that can be integrated into interventions, okay? And we also provide a resource library. And I actually have another slide. I'll just kind of show it. I didn't plan on it. But in this particular resource library, we have clinical, community, educational, and media resources that are available, publicly available for individuals to go and look at and find resources. Several of them are California based. This was funded by Blue Shield of California, but there are some national resources available that individuals can go and review. And then, let's see, am I still sharing my screen by chance?
No, you just stopped.
Okay, all right. And so one other thing. And so the last thing here is that we did conclude the report with some recommendations for future directions in climate anxiety, climate mental health, to support young people in the context of climate change. And we highlighted very promising approaches in schools and families and communities and clinical settings for climate anxiety support. So I do encourage you to access the links, take a look at the resource library, and please reach out if you do have any questions at all. You can reach out to me at Sheets, that's SHEATS, at cchangeinstitute.com or hello@cchangeinstitute.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will have time for interactions and Q&A a little bit later, but I'm going to hand it off to Max and Vanessa now.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. I mean, we can jump right in. We have the questions from the agenda. And in case you guys haven't gotten to take a look at those, some of our guiding questions just for me and Vanessa to talk a little bit about what led us into this work, what stokes our climate anxiety the most, and what helps us work through it. And then lastly, how can Gen Zers translate climate emotions into something meaningful? And I can start out really quick. Again, my name is Max Offerman. I'm a 24-year-old environmentalist. I received my degree in environmental studies and sustainability from Michigan State and graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. This all started for me a little bit longer ago when I was around the age 13 and I first started struggling with depression. I was not exposed to environmentalism or the environmental movement at all, pretty much, which I think is definitely part of it. But throughout high school, I still had my struggles with mental health and with finding meaning and purpose in the world. Kind of led me more toward the counterculture side of things, skateboarding, art and creativity. But eventually my senior year came around and I had to decide what I wanted to do theoretically for the rest of my life, and trying to save the planet was the only sort of course that I could rationalize. But nothing really could have prepared me for what I was going to learn in those 4 years of college. And the depression never really went away, but it changed. And I think I quickly found myself overwhelmed with the degree. I very quickly jumped into activism, specifically political and community organizing. But even so, it was like every class, every lecture I attended was learning more and more about the way that humans were irreparably damaging the planet and how every decision I made seemed to have an impact, beyond my comprehension at times. And it wasn't until senior year that I kind of realized I've gone 4 years in this degree without a professor saying, here's what to do if this makes you feel depressed, or here's what to do if this makes you feel anxious. And for the first time, I started exploring resources in that space and climate emotions, and it led me to the work of Clover Hogan, a UK-based climate activist, and her startup, Force of Nature. So after college, after graduating, I helped Clover launch Force of Nature, and we went on to lead Zoom workshops with young people around the world, much like were described in the survey that Jelana was referencing, and helping them shift from a state of anxiety to agency, with our real challenge being this feeling of powerlessness that we saw in 16-year-olds and 60-year-olds alike that would say, I'm powerless to change this, and where we saw people shutting down rather than stepping up. So in a nutshell, that's what brings me here today.
Thank you, Max. And I'm going to post those questions in the chat and hand it off to Vanessa. So the questions are: what led you into the work? What stokes your climate anxiety the most? And what helps you work through it? And how can Gen Zers translate climate emotions into something meaningful? And I think take any one of those questions and dive in.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, I think that my background as the child of immigrants from Mexico definitely set me up in a way that I was understanding the world. My grandma always kept plants around. We always were like very much a wholesome diet, like recognizing vegetables, plants when walking on the street would be like, oh, there's an avocado tree based off of the leaves. So that connection kind of set me up for a relationship with the world around me that basically helped me transition into this environmental movement when the catalyst of fear came around. So like with 2012, the Mayan calendar prediction of like the world ending, there was a lot of uncertainty. I was a child, and I believe, like all these predictions and such, and making those connections to environmental issues such as tsunamis or earthquakes, because I live in California. So earthquakes like make you distrust the ground that you're even walking on. So like having that familiarity with the environment and hearing these things makes it much more easy for you to not be paralyzed by the fear that comes with the unknown of these realities. And so when I realized the climate crisis is going to be an issue that encompasses all of these realities that I'm not going to be able to handle on my own, I felt like there was different baskets of knowledge, I guess, to reach into and like to collaborate with. And that kind of just led me into the environmental justice aspect of this, just because, as I said, like my parents were migrants. And so acknowledging how that intertwines, like the whole intersectional environmentalism aspect of it all, being able to connect all of that made me that much more prepared to come into these spaces when welcomed and help people navigate, as well as navigate my own anxieties and depression that came with the reality of it all.
I know that we went a little bit over on our allotted time, so I'll defer to you, Don, on if you'd like us to take one more question.
Maybe one more.
Okay, we'll go really quick on, I'll try and cover both as quick as I can. For what stokes my climate anxiety the most and what helps me work through it? For me, kind of like Vanessa was describing, but the uncertainty. You know, I read the same papers that you guys do. I read the same reports. I studied it for at least 4 years, and then continued on and making it my work. And so I know where to look for the worst case scenarios. I know where to look just to see at a glimpse of what my future is going to look like. And that uncertainty is absolutely paralyzing. It's terrifying. I don't even save for retirement right now because that's what, you know, that's what this means for me. Because how could I possibly be thinking of retirement? And that's probably the part that gets me the most. I think the translating it into something meaningful / what helps me work through it, coming up with what else it could look like, and really focusing on vision as well as this changing cultural paradigm that we're sort of operating within. The fact of the matter is that everyone in this room didn't have to come tonight, but did, because they care about this, and that at least offers a little bit of motivation. Everything in the beginning of this workshop is pretty much everything I wish I was taught as a child and had been exposed to growing up. So that also offers a lot of reassurance. I think focusing on the answers, getting clear on my own vision and what one problem in the world I might be able to solve, and being okay with being sad, has all really helped me get through this and make sense of it.
Thank you, Max. Vanessa, did you have any other comments before we transition?
Yes, I felt like to direct the third question, or to speak to the third question, I feel like oftentimes we want to push, especially the youth, to action immediately, which is even more overwhelming than just understanding that we're in a climate crisis. And so rather than paralyze them with the fear of the realities, but also of these responsibilities, we need to transition them and have them understand that their well-being individually is also important, rather than like, oh, the world is ending, so you just got to throw yourself into this cause and ignore your own life and not live it, you know? So oftentimes we see adults that are emotionally unavailable, but this is a result of children whose emotional needs were not met. And so rather than continue that cycle, we need to invest in our youth and their emotional needs, specifically the climate crisis, as it is the biggest obstacle that we're going to face and are facing, so that when they're prepared and interested in pitching in with their own skills, with their art, with their music, with any resources that they have in order to like involve themselves in the movement, when they're ready for that, they're emotionally not stable, but like they're able to self-soothe, self-regulate, you know, as they do these things, rather than do it the hard way that a lot of us have experienced, just like ignoring your own health, ignoring your own mental health, and burning out, which is of course not suitable for, or like beneficial for anyone. But I did want to touch on that. I'm sorry for going over time.
No, thank you. I think what each of you have shared is so powerful and just so important. And I really think it's a nice segue into the next and to Vernessa's portion, because what Max said was about like just the need. He said that, as a child, needing to kind of like wish that he had been exposed to, what Leslie did in the beginning. That's what was needed. And then Vanessa, what you shared about basically providing education in the right way and the types of content and it being basically developmentally appropriate and not just overwhelming youth, throwing them in there, pushing them to do this, that, or the other. And so, I think that's what we need to hear as we think about like what resources are needed for young people, what resources are needed in the schools. And so we're going to segue into resources and strategies for building that emotional resilience, which is essentially what you've kind of spoken to, Vanessa. So Vernessa, happy to kind of introduce you into the conversation. I do have a question for you. What resources are available for teachers right now to address climate emotions? And I do have more questions. I can put them in the chat, or if you want me to kind of segue into them, whichever is your preferred strategy.
Sure, I can hop right in. Thank
Okay.
you, Jelana. And I just want to thank the speakers previously, Max, Vanessa, and Leslie, and also Jelana's presentation. It really does set the tone for why we're here. And I agree with you, Max. I wish I knew that information that someone had shared with me so many years ago in elementary, middle school, how to even process feelings, and that it's okay to feel what you feel, to stand in your truth. So I'd just like to share a little bit about NEEF. We are the National Environmental Education Foundation. We're a national nonprofit organization that was congressionally chartered to work in collaboration with the Environmental Protection Agency to promote and enhance environmental literacy nationwide. We are creating opportunities for individuals to learn and improve on their experiences with nature so that it can improve their lives as well as the health of the planet. The way that we work is by making the environment more accessible, more relatable, more relevant and connected to the daily lives of individuals, and really tapping into our children and making sure that they understand, as it's been stated, in an age appropriate way, different situations and what role they play and what they can do with the information that they're being presented with. We achieve our goals through 3 focus areas, which are K through 12 education, health and wellness, as well as conservation. So as we're approaching this conversation regarding mental health, climate and mental health, it's really important for NEEF to point individuals towards nature, making sure that they understand what that nature connection is, and how to access and what are some of those remarkable benefits of spending time in nature. The research shows, and individuals can speak and attest to, the various mental health benefits, the emotional benefits that you feel just by stepping out, not necessarily having to plan an activity or plan a trip, but actually engaging in nature. If it's just to listen to the birds or look out the window at a tree, just trying to make that connection has proven results in being able to reduce anxiety, reduce stress, and reduce some of those feelings of loss and trauma. We know that it's not a treatment. We don't share or promote that as a treatment effort because we don't want to be trivial regarding mental health. But we do know that there are resources there, and that's how NEEF wants to promote, through families to children to caregivers to everyone, to show how accessing and engaging in nature can provide and improve on good health. It helps to build community and community engagement, as well as building environmental stewardship. So we have a few programs at NEEF. I will direct you to our website, neefusa.org, and I can share my contact information at the end of this presentation for more information regarding that. And as Jelana was speaking on other opportunities and resources for building resilience, we really think for school teachers, for educators, both informal as well as formal, it's important to consider and approach this from a holistic framework. We can't expect or anticipate that the school teacher can take on the lion's share of this education and being able to approach this subject. It will take a whole school, whole community framework and approach to address these issues. And so what we're thinking about with that is, who are we engaging? Who do you have access to? What are some of those assets and resources that are at your disposal in the school system? As you're having conversations around climate, regardless of the grade that you're engaging with, are there opportunities to bring in your school counselor into these conversations to allow students to really process in the moment? And we know that time is difficult. Timing is very difficult when it comes to classroom teaching, that there's a lot of information and content that educators have to move through. But are there also other opportunities outside of the classroom where there's place-based education, where you can bring in those additional resources to have some of these very difficult conversations with students, but letting them know that it's okay. It's okay to feel what they're feeling. It's okay to talk about the concerns and anxiousness that and angst that they're experiencing, and that you too have and share some of the very same concerns and feelings that they have. So with this whole school, whole community approach, you're looking beyond the walls of your classroom and seeing, how can we engage the school administrators? How can we engage mental health professionals? School nurses, I think, are valuable resources to talk about how students can cope or provide some coping skills. They may not have all of the answers, as none of us do, in terms of climate and mental health or many other issues that students are faced with. However, they do come well equipped to address issues of stress, to address how to talk to students around trauma and coping and experiences related to loss. So it's very important, I think, for us to engage everyone that's within that community, within our school community, bringing those voices to the table so that we can all identify, again, the strengths, but then also identify gaps, identify where we need more resources, where perhaps certain resources aren't working, and we can collaborate to figure out or determine what would be the next best process for that. So it's important that we really focus the resources that we have in the school system to elevate and strengthen the program and engagement that we have.
Thank you, Vernessa. So I think that we can move on to Andra. And so Andra is with the San Mateo County Environmental and Climate Aligned Trauma Informed Practices. And so Andra.
Hey, yeah, I can jump in. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
What inspired the creation of the materials, and what is happening, or what programs are being offered?
Yeah, great. Well, it's really exciting to be included here, and I've just already learned so much from the other speakers. So thank you so much for sharing your stories and your journeys and examples. It's been really, really enriching. So I'm speaking from a county office of education in California, and a lot of states have this kind of setup where the state is broken down into county offices that support districts. So in the state of California, we have 58 county offices that support the over 1,000 school districts in California. And so in my county, in San Mateo County, we support 23 different school districts. And our work is really about this initiative that we launched in 2017 was really about providing backbone support to all these different school districts to help integrate environmental literacy and environmental sustainability and climate resiliency across our schools, campuses, curriculums, and community and culture. And so we're the first county office actually in the state of California to try an initiative like this at a broad scale. And so when I came into the work, I realized that there's a lot of, there was a lack of knowledge, I think, of like how environmental injustice and climate change connect to trauma. And not by fault of anybody, just that people just weren't having that conversation yet. And so I'll share my screen really quick just to show a couple of different slides. We were talking a lot about trauma at the time in 2017-18 and 2018-19 when we started this initiative and really understanding it in this way about it being this response to distressing or disturbing events. And so I did a lot of research at that time to figure out, well, how is it connected to environmental injustice? And in that research was able to find this really great framework of the pair of ACEs. So ACEs are like adverse childhood experiences that are happening in the individual's home or to each individual. But the pair of ACEs really brings in this idea of the community environment. And you can see here, there's like a little segment here that says poor housing quality and affordability. And really that's like one little phrase that actually means like all of these environmental injustices, right? And so a lot of the work that we did early on was helping our districts and school leaders like understand that and tease that apart and really get more familiar with what these environmental injustices are and how much people were experiencing that in San Mateo County. And in our county, so we're right in the heart of Silicon Valley, which means that we actually have some of the lowest income communities in California seated right next to the highest income communities in California. And we actually see that there's a 10-year difference of lifespan for the kids who are in the lowest income communities with the highest income. And that is like very much directly related to these environmental injustices. So it's very real. Like this is a very present concept for us. And so one of the things we needed to help our teachers and our school administrators understand is that was even happening and that has like trauma connected to it. And then also showing this connection to climate trauma as well. So this is like the third ACEs realm of really bringing in climate change and all these different disasters. And since starting this work in 2017, we've had so much of an increase in disasters in our own county, but also of course in California and beyond. So this really started to resonate with people. And we had an already existing framework in our county for trauma-informed practices, like no matter what the trauma. And so what I realized I needed to do was really show, okay, if these are our trauma-informed practices in our schools, what does it mean to use an environmental and climate lens to apply that to these different focus areas? So that's what we did was we went about helping folks draw those connections in sort of like a crosswalk. So our work already focused on this idea of doing environmental literacy and sustainability and climate resilience across the campus, curriculum, and community and culture. So now we wanted to show like, how do you actually pair that up with this framework? So I'll just put this in the chat box so people have access to it. And I'll just show you the major resource that we developed was this one right here, which really like walks people at the start of the resource through that definition of trauma and how it connects to environmental literacy. And a lot of the resources that we included here are some of the ones that people already shared about all the research that has gone into like how climate change connects to trauma. And then the bottom half of it is really just giving practical examples of what you can do in your community and culture or in your curriculum and instruction or in your campus to do something like understand trauma and stress. Or what does it look like across those 4 C's to really address resilience and social and emotional learning with a climate and an environmental lens? And what can our schools do to really empower our students and collaborate across the community? So we actually went through each and every one of those and really gave tips and recommendations of what schools can do. And then in our own programs, because we were running our own capacity building programs, we started to realize like beyond this little toolkit that we developed in these practical examples, like people really needed it modeled for them. So we ended up developing more resources. This one is like a trauma-informed nature connection activities. So in all of our programs that we run with teachers and students, when we would talk about environmental injustice or talk about the climate data, we would follow it up with a trauma-informed nature connection activity so that people really understood that like nature, yes, everything we're talking about is sort of like it feels like the planet attacking us, but really it's like we've attacked the planet and the planet has no option but to like, swing back basically. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can live in harmony with nature and we can look at indigenous wisdom and really understand that relationship. And so we put together this resource that just like has all these different activities, and then we take people through those activities. And then a couple other ones that we developed were looking at how you can use literature in the classroom. So we have like a whole list of storybooks that you can use with younger children and also in middle school and high school. And then we would provide examples of how to read these stories with students and how to do that work with them. And then I was trying to see if the last one is in here. The last thing, is really solutionary project-based learning. So knowing that our teachers, like it's hard to start this work off as a teacher when you're just learning about it for the first time. So we provided a continuum for our teachers to understand, like you might start this work in a supplemental way, like just bring in a little dose of it into your classroom. But eventually we're going to help you in our training programs get all the way over to here where you can do like knowledge to action, solutionary project-based learning with your students. And then we take them through that process of learning how to do that. And we've provided like solutionary units of study for them so that they can do that. And then also we provided like a really clear toolkit on how to have student-led community impact projects or administrator-led community impact projects so that our fellows really felt like they could be successful in the end. And now that we've been at this for about 5 years, we have a ton of different changemaker story examples from all over our county of different, students and teachers and administrators. And so now we have this kind of like reinforcing loop of people get inspired by these stories, they enter into our programs, and then soon they become the change makers, and it just kind of grows more and more in our county. So really excited about that. And I'm just so grateful to be working with amazing people across our county to be able to help people handle these emotions of climate change, which are so overwhelming, but also feel empowered to do something.
This is amazing, just to see all the work that you've done and resources that you've shared. Just for myself, having done work in San Mateo County for a number of years, I hadn't shared that with you the other day when we connected, but it's very, very exciting to see that. So I encourage you all to access all of the links that she just shared. And all the links that we've shared over the course of today. I also want to remind you to please put your questions in the chat. We would love to answer any questions that you have. There was one post a moment ago that I'm going to read through. It says, let's see, it's from Jay Callahan. Given the uplifting, even exhilarating feelings it provides children, what are the best arguments against discussion of the work of high school students who have already successfully led STEM-based climate action for years now? As typically happens in webinars, for instance, what are the benefits and to whom of specifically ignoring the young women of color whose innovative contributions have led to major reductions of the carbon footprint of the largest buildings in the capital city of the United States? Thank you, Vernessa, and all the panelists for the wonderful presentations and discussion. Vernessa, your role, recommendations, and life experiences are so valuable. So any comments there?
Oh, well, I'll chime in on Jim's question, and I think Andra got it, hinted at that anyway.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think it's a huge, important question that dealing with how energy companies have lied to all of us, and fessing up to that and dealing with that is really important, although somewhat different than our focus tonight. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but to acknowledge that that's a real issue and a real problem, I think is important, and it adds to the anxiety and depression and stress to have that going on. I'll defer to other panelists to say things too.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is a workshop. And so we're going to be doing some workshopping. And we have breakout sessions. And so we're doing these breakout sessions because we want to know what's happening in the classrooms, okay? And so we're going to be kind of trying to get a sense of what's happening in climate or environmental education, and looking at, direct climate experiences. And so we're going to be breaking up into groups. So if you're in the document, then you can go into the group that focuses on elementary school, middle school, high school, college and university, informal education, parents. And if you're not really sure where to go, or you want an eclectic mix, you can go into the other group. And so each of the panelists, including myself, will be leading each of these groups, and you'll have access to a Jamboard.
I haven't opened the breakout groups quite yet. I will do that in a moment, but
Okay.
give folks just a tiny intro to
Mhm.
Jamboards. They all look essentially the same, except for labels on the first page and at the top of each document, as it hopefully shows up. So I'm in the high school one, where Max will be the facilitator. No, actually, that's not right. That's me. I changed that. And then there's some instructions on that page where if you want to scroll through, you click on this up at the top, and you can post comments by clicking on the sticky note button and putting in your comment, and then save it, and it'll appear there, and you can move it off the top of the text, and you can also delete it if you don't want it there. But that's the basics, and I am going to click the start breakout groups. Welcome back. And we are behind schedule, so that's, I think, going to be our lone breakout session. And Jelana, you're muted. You're labeled as facilitating this part, but I can keep my mouth running if you want.
I mean, I think we can do it together. I'm interested in hearing how the breakout groups went. They went by, at least our group went by faster than expected. So I think we'll start with the elementary group and just get some high-level insights on maybe some common themes that came out of your breakout. Does anyone want to share from that group? So that was led by Vernessa.
Yeah. Alicia, do you want to share?
Sure, I can share, but please add if I miss anything. I think, we said in terms of what's happening in the classrooms currently, there's a lot of just nature play, nature exploration, getting outside for field trips, walking on trails, and some environmental education too. Gardening and kind of appreciation for outdoors, caring for things like plants, caring for animals, bugs, things like that. Measurement of weather is big, I think, in the elementary years. And then also Forest Fridays, outdoor schools, green schools, things like that are more popular in elementary. And then I think in terms of response to direct climate experiences, we talked some about what are some of those pieces that students respond to, and wildfires have been really big in the Colorado area. Of course, the Marshall Fire, high winds, extreme weather like storms, and high tide flooding, things like that. And that, in response to that, I think there's some students, have been taking action. I think especially action before the disaster happens or the some of these extreme weather events happen. Not sure if you see it so much after the disaster happens, because I think students are dealing with a lot of emotions related to that. And, you know, in terms of what to do, what exists, I think there's a lot of community support that exists out there in various different organizations that can partner with schools on some of this. And then maybe what's missing is I think attending more to some of how to deal with some of those emotions after a disaster happens, and you know, actions maybe that people can take, students can take specifically to help with some of those aftermath pieces. And then I think there was a couple other things there at the end too that we talked about, right?
Yeah, it's given the time, that's probably a
Okay.
good overview.
Yeah.
How about the middle school group?
Yeah.
Well, I can jump in for our group and just share that I don't think we put too much on the Jamboard. We got into a big conversation and we had just really awesome participants in the middle school group, but really just talking through like, you know, what's possible and talking through also like the language that we use and at what age is it appropriate. So we were just kind of going through some of the like high level discussion of like, how do you do this in middle school? How do you think about it from different subject area lenses, but also just the importance of how we use our language and whether or not it's empowering or not. And also just like, how do you get started? Because middle school is sort of that, as Virtual Leslie shared in the very beginning, right? Middle school is that time where it's like, they have so much excitement and enthusiasm, but they don't have a lot of knowledge and skills yet. And so you want to kind of help them get that started.
Okay. And I was in the high school group where Allison's going to say a few words for us.
So we also did not create a Jamboard. We were like talking like crazy. I'm in New Jersey outside of Atlantic City. And then my partner was in California in a climate anxiety nonprofit services. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong. And the issue was, are the kids like so badly affected and like frightened to talk about climate change? And in New Jersey, what's happening is we're so short-staffed that I'm actually the middle school librarian, but I'm special ed. I'm all over the building doing everything. There's so many stressors on the teachers where I'm in this district in New Jersey that we can't quite get up, and we want to talk about it. The teachers and the kids want to talk about it. We have one teacher that's teaching a lot of nature climate stuff, and the kids are flourishing with him. But we talked about how even though New Jersey has passed climate curriculum standards, we are not like up and running with it. So we talked about how we need administrative support, principals, superintendents to get behind it. But I have to, listening to Alicia talk about elementary school, it sounded so nice and organized and they're doing a lot. One of our teachers, one of our good ones was interviewing in Denver. So I feel like Colorado might be doing like pretty well. Different states are doing different things, and that's what's nice about talking to you guys. But where I'm at in New Jersey, we are just so stressed out, like covering each other's classes, and it's a bit chaotic where we are. So we can't think straight. But I said to Don, in meeting in these groups, I'm turnkeying all the videos I'm getting along these lines, which started with Rutgers. And we just have to keep pushing for it. That's what I'm going to do from where I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll just jump in real quick. So in terms of what's happening in the classroom at the college level, they're extreme. So some students haven't heard of climate change based on in our group. And then some students are anxious, whereas others don't care about it at all. And so one of the things that came out of it is that they feel that just overall the universities are not really recognizing the mental health as an important. And so there needs to be some kind of impact at the policy level. And then geography plays a role. So in the same region, there may be different kind of reactions in the classroom and amongst students in terms of how they interpret or feel about climate change. And then in terms of how people respond to, the direct climate experiences, in terms of how people think about alternatives, there's limited imagination into, what can be done in terms of like, okay, instead of driving, what can they do just in terms of like, urbanization. So there's lack of stretch of the imagination. But then in terms of with the schools, they're hiring faculty, or faculty members will focus on injustices related to climate. In terms of resources and tools and assets and so forth, they said that there needs to be buy-in from others in the university and departments. There are a number of assets needed, scholarly and supportive environment and professional development of faculty. There also needs to be mental health support for faculty helping students, and then more time dedicated in the classroom for these types of discussions as well. So we had a very fruitful conversation, and it's all documented on the Jamboard.
And Sherry put in a plug for a position that they have open at ESF, Environmental Science and Forestry.
Yes.
And let's hear from the informal group.
Sure, I can jump right in, and Ingrid, please share if there's anything that I missed. But Ingrid and I had a really interesting conversation on informal education and what's being done. There's a number of different professional development webinars and trainings that are being made available to educators to provide more training and framing around this concept and issue. And then also as it relates to the museums, developing more exhibits, making sure that those are available for visitors to engage their understanding and questions around climate change as well. And then as we moved over to indirect responses to climate experiences, I thought this was really interesting, where we discussed the development of trainings, but then also the storytelling, being able to talk about personal stories and making that connection back to the individual so that it's resonating with them and it's resonating and hitting in a different way, so to speak. So from discussing climate and perhaps weather events and what impact that has on a particular family, or discussing if a person had heat exhaustion, being able to share those particular stories are really important to reaching different individuals around these issues. So, and then also one thing that was mentioned was how we both appreciate the fact that students are more willing to share. They're more open. They're not as reluctant around talking about those issues that concern them, that the traumas and the stress that they're faced with. So it's really important that we are sensitive to those questions, sensitive to that information, but then also try to provide as much information and solutions that we can offer. And I feel like I cheated, Ingrid, because we didn't get to the asset mapping component. I thought that was for part B. So I apologize for that.
That's okay. We're running low on time, so
I jumped ahead. That's all that was.
Jim's got a comment there on informal ed as well. And large community events are back. I will also note that I'm being interviewed by a reporter about the uptick in COVID cases in New York State now, so we'll see. And the other group, was there another group? Were there people in there?
It was, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Max, we combine parents and other. Max, go for it.
So we were also one of the groups that chose free-form conversation over the Jamboard. It was me, Sarah, and Melanie. So Melanie, if you felt like sharing it all about just a little insight into your work and perhaps climate education and emotions in your space.
Sure. So
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I really appreciated the opportunity to connect with Max directly because his story really resonated for me. I'm, a decade or a little more older than Max is, but find myself in very much the same boat where I don't see a point in saving for retirement at this point in time. And I'm instead trying to figure out how I can leverage everything I have to hopefully at some point come back to wanting to save for something that might resemble retirement. And so, I have a 4-year-old that Max got to meet. And so she certainly motivates some of that. And I probably wouldn't have had her if I had been climate aware at the time that I did have her. I'm really grateful that she's in my life because she definitely is a big source of joy and keeps me going. But I work in Alberta, Canada, so I get to work in an environment where there is a lot of pushback on climate. And definitely excited about using the angle of mental wellness being a topic that people are very interested in as an angle that is really important because my background is in the sciences. I'm a chemist, and so I certainly was not educated around how to deal with emotions and have sought that out myself. And so I'm really excited to have a community of practice of people who are coming together to help us learn and facilitate the learning of how to be with difficult emotions and how to come back to active hope and solutions frameworks like Project Drawdown and Project Regeneration. So really grateful for the opportunity to connect.
Great. And I'll just a couple of closing thoughts from me before I hand it off to Max for our closing thoughts. One is there's a line in the agenda early on to not be afraid of fear, which of course isn't really quite the right phrasing because it makes sense to be afraid of that. But the idea is not to suppress it, but to engage your emotions and recognize that if you don't, that doesn't help in the long term, might help in the short term typically. And one of the best ways to address negative emotions is to work on the problem and to get busy and make it so that it makes sense to save for retirement. And one of the talks I have given many times in the past is we're too late, let's get to work anyway, which recognizes that when we face disaster, we often don't respond at the rate we should, but that doesn't mean at all to not respond. I mean, we were too late for responding to Hitler. We were too late to end slavery. We were too late on COVID. We've been too late on Putin. And the list is very, very long indeed, but that doesn't mean don't get to business. It means it's more urgent than it maybe needed to be if we could have gotten our acts together, but it's time to get our acts together now. And with that thought, I'm going to hand it off to Max, I think is the last piece. Am I right about that? I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but I think that's right.
Yeah, feel free, anyone, correct us if we're wrong.
Right, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Just real quick in closing today, I wanted to bring up a closing exercise that we did with Force of Nature and in our Anxiety to Agency workshops. Pretty adequate that we, I just heard Project Drawdown mentioned. One of the parts of our workshop and parts of our reframe, if you will, on emotions and our own role in solving the climate crisis was changing in perspective around the problem and recognizing that climate change isn't so much the problem that we want to solve as it is the symptom of all the problems that we do need to solve and that we can solve. So at Force of Nature, we really believed that a big source of our anxieties and our stress wasn't that we cared so much, but was that we cared about a lot of things and found ourselves stretching ourselves thin across many different issues and causes. And in that, we really honed in on this idea that impact comes from focus. So for all of you, I guess as we finish off this workshop, I would just like you to all reflect on one problem in the world that you feel compelled to solve. And I don't mean in terms of the right problem or the problem that will solve all other problems, but the one that you connect with emotionally, the one that makes sense for you and your community, one that's maybe not too, whether it's really long term or whether it's shorter time span based on where you are in your own life and career. I'd like you all just to meditate on that. What is one problem in the world you would like to solve? And it's okay if that starts broad, because at least speaking for myself, it started very broad and I've gotten the chance to narrow that down. There's sort of a second little bit too. Take your time and thinking of this. I know it kind of, it can take a lifetime and we're running out of time here. But in part two, once you have your problem in mind, I'd like to invite you to imagine a world with that problem solved. Whether it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. What would that world look like? Other guiding questions you can ask on that front are, what would have to change? Who's with me? What does the world look like? But I hope that's something on the back of a very productive conversation that keeps this forward thinking and this forward momentum going.
Thank you, Max, and thank you one and all. And